Lord Carnarvon lay in the Continental Savoy Hotel in Cairo, his face swollen and purple from an infection that had begun as a simple mosquito bite. On April 5, 1923, just months after the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun, the man who had funded the greatest archaeological find of the century breathed his last. At that exact moment, every light in Cairo reportedly flickered and died, plunging the city into a heavy, absolute darkness. Thousands of miles away at Highclere Castle in England, his favorite terrier Susie let out a mournful howl and dropped dead. Whether these stories were true or the fever dreams of a press obsessed with the boy pharaoh, they served as the opening act for a decade of tragedy. This was the moment the world began to believe that King Tutankhamun had left a guard behind, and that its weapons were not spears or arrows, but illness, accident, and shadow. The discovery had begun with a much quieter sound, the scrape of a shovel against a single stone step. On November 4, 1922, a water boy working for Howard Carter's team stumbled over a piece of rock hidden beneath the debris of ancient workmen's huts in the Valley of the Kings. Carter had been digging in this scorched, dusty graveyard for 6 years with almost nothing to show for it. His funding from Lord Carnarvon was on the brink of being cut off. But that one step led to a staircase, and that staircase led to a sealed door bearing the royal seal of a pharaoh whose name had been largely erased from history. For 3 weeks, Carter waited for Carnarvon to arrive from England, recovering the stairs with sand to hide them from the tomb robbers who still haunted the valley. When they finally stood before the second sealed door on November 26th, Carter took a chisel and made a tiny hole in the upper left corner. He inserted a candle, the flickering flame fighting against the stale 3,000-year-old air rushing out. When Carnarvon finally broke the silence and asked if he could see anything, Carter replied with those 3 words that would haunt the rest of his life: "Yes, wonderful things." But as the treasures, the golden chariots, the inlaid thrones, the mountain of jewelry, began to emerge from the darkness, so did the omens. On the very day the tomb was opened, a cobra, the symbol of the Egyptian monarchy, allegedly slithered into Howard Carter's house and swallowed his lucky canary. The Egyptian workers, deeply attuned to the symbolism of their ancestors, took it as a clear warning: the pharaoh's protector had struck. Within weeks, the press had found its own version of a curse. A story began to circulate that a clay tablet had been found in the tomb's antechamber, inscribed with a terrifying promise: "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." In reality, no such tablet was ever found, but the narrative had taken flight. The novelist Marie Corelli fueled the fire by publishing a letter in the New York World magazine, claiming she possessed an ancient Arabic book that warned of dire punishment for those who intruded upon a pharaoh's rest. When Carnarvon died just 2 weeks after her warning appeared, the coincidence was too perfect for the public to ignore. The fear reached such a height that even the creator of the world's most famous detective, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, weighed in. Doyle was a devout spiritualist, and he told reporters that Carnarvon's death might have been caused by elementals, artificial spirits created by ancient priests to guard the mummy. He suggested these forces could induce physical illness in anyone who crossed the threshold. This wasn't just idle talk, it changed how the world viewed the excavation. While Carter dismissed it all as Tommy rot and unadulterated claptrap, the people around him were starting to fall like autumn leaves. George J. Gould, a wealthy American railroad executive, visited the tomb in early 1923 and died of a sudden fever in the French Riviera shortly after. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the radiologist who was invited to x-ray the mummy, fell ill and died in 1924. Then there was A.C. Mace, a key member of Carter's team who had helped remove the shroud from the king's body. He began suffering from pleurisy and pneumonia, eventually dying in 1928 at the age of 53. Each obituary was a new chapter in the legend, a ledger of lives supposedly traded for gold. The tragedies weren't confined to the desert sands. They followed the excavators home to London and beyond. Richard Bethel, who served as Carter's personal secretary and was one of the first people to enter the burial chamber, was found smothered in his bed at an elite Mayfair gentlemen's club in 1929. The circumstances were murky enough to spark rumors of ritual murder. His father, Lord Westbury, was so distraught by the horrors he claimed to be witnessing that he threw himself from his seventh-floor apartment in 1930. He reportedly left a note saying, "I really cannot stand any more horrors, and I hardly see what good I am going to do here, so I am making my exit." Even gifts from the tomb seemed to carry a weight of their own. Carter had given his friend Sir Bruce Ingham a mummified hand wearing a scarab bracelet inscribed with a warning about fire and water. Not long after, Ingham's house burned to the ground. When he tried to rebuild it, the site was leveled by a flood. The pattern was becoming impossible for many to ignore, regardless of what the scientists said. In the decades that followed, researchers looked for a more earthly explanation for the curse of the pharaohs. They looked at the biology of the tomb itself. When a tomb is sealed for 3,000 years, it becomes a literal petri dish. Archaeologists were breathing in dust, bat guano, and ancient organic matter that had been rotting in silence since the Bronze Age. Modern studies have found that ancient mummies and tomb walls often harbor spores of Aspergillus flavus, a fungus that can cause severe allergic reactions and lung hemorrhaging, especially in people with weakened immune systems. Lord Carnarvon, who had suffered from chronic lung issues since a nearly fatal car accident in 1901, would have been particularly vulnerable. In 1973, when the tomb of the Polish king Casimir IV was opened, 10 out of 12 researchers died within weeks from similar fungal infections. It is a chillingly logical answer. The curse wasn't a magic spell, but a biological trap, a lung-rotting powder waiting for the first breath of fresh air to carry it into the lungs of the intruders. Yet even science has its holes. If the curse was biological, why did it spare Howard Carter, the man who spent more time in the tomb than anyone else? Carter lived until 1939, eventually dying of lymphoma at the age of 64. Lady Evelyn Herbert, Carnarvon's daughter, who was one of the very first to crawl through the hole into the burial chamber, lived a full life and died in 1980 at the age of 79. Of the 26 people present when the burial chamber was officially opened, only 6 died within the first decade. Statistically, most of the victims were elderly or already in poor health, and their lifespans were actually quite normal for the era. But statistics make for poor storytelling, and the world preferred the mystery of the evil elemental over the reality of infected mosquito bites and occupational hazards. The curse became a cultural phenomenon, inspiring countless horror films and novels, forever linking the image of the bandage-wrapped mummy with a vengeful, supernatural power. The legacy of Tutankhamun's discovery is a paradox. It brought more knowledge of ancient Egypt to the public than any event in history, yet it also buried the truth under a layer of superstition. The boy king, who had been forgotten for millennia, became a household name not because of his life, but because of the deaths that followed his return to the light. We see the gold and the lapis lazuli, but we also see the shadow of Lord Carnarvon in that darkened Cairo hotel room. We see the scientific reality of fungal spores, but we also remember the howl of a dog in the English countryside. The mystery of the curse endures because it touches a primitive nerve, the idea that some things are meant to stay buried, and that the price of curiosity might be higher than we are prepared to pay. Whether it was the work of ancient priests or the simple consequence of disturbing a 3,000-year-old ecosystem, the discovery of Tutankhamun changed the world, and perhaps, in its own way, the world changed the boy king. If you know someone who would be fascinated by the blend of history and mystery in the Valley of the Kings, consider sharing this story with them.